unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome. I am stranded, not at my house, but in Miami. I've been having canceled flights for days. Maybe this coming morning I'll make it back home to New York. And when I'm there, I will tell you about my journey. So until then, let's talk about tonight. Our first topic will be kind of an interesting one. How to break bread and how to talk to someone who has fallen into the conspiracy theory hole. They're a conspiracy theorist. They're at your house. Maybe they're a family member. How do you talk to them? How do you relate to them? That's what we'll cover on a little segment we call Conspiracy Corner in 10 minutes' time. Then, the 4-day work week. That's right. Someone's done a study on people who work only 4 days of the week. Are they more productive? Are they less productive? Do the employers that have these rules come to regret them? And how could maybe you indulge in a 4-day work week? Those are things that we'll cover halfway through the hour. It's going to be a great show. We got a lot to cover, so let's jump in. Imagine looking up at the sky for inspiration and then getting a promo code for 15% off teeth whitening instead. Nothing says the awe of the cosmos, the beauty and the glory of the stars, like a QR code glowing where the Little Dipper used to be, or the Big Dipper, just a dipper. If that happened, it wouldn't be the second coming of the Messiah, it would be a coupon. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. There's a Russian startup called Avant Space, and they've decided that the glory of staring at the night sky is just something without enough ambition. They're working on hundreds of tiny satellites, armed with lasers. And these aren't weapons, and they're not meant to defend Earth. No, that would be too useful. These lasers are for beaming down ads into the sky. Corporate logos, taglines. Maybe a floating Arby's sandwich if you're lucky. Now, they say this is about making space, the night sky, entertaining. But what's more entertaining than watching capitalism colonize Orion's belt? One of the dudes actually involved said, "Where there is humanity, there will be advertisements." Which might be a beautiful sentiment. I believe it was first uttered by a Coca-Cola bottle floating in WALL-E. You know, the movie about Earth destroyed? Never mind. Astronomers, as you can imagine, are extremely happy about this. And by happy, I mean horrified. They're calling this the ultimate light trespass. You know it's bad when the people who get excited about distant radio waves from dying stars are like, that's too much. Now here's the problem. These satellites don't just mess up your Instagram-worthy Milky Way shot. They ruin telescope observations and make astronomy harder. And this isn't hypothetical. SpaceX already freaked out scientists with its Starlink satellites. That was the dry run. Now we're talking glowing Big Macs streaking across the cosmos. Now managing all the junk in space is already a nightmare. There's so much debris up there. Soon it'll be like trying to fly a kite in a blender. Add a few hundred satellite laser ads for crypto exchanges, and suddenly we're one typo away from a satellite pileup that could block the sun. Honestly, maybe that's the long-term plan. If you can't see the stars, maybe you'll finally subscribe to Netflix. Now, the UN can't technically ban this stuff, but they could politely suggest that everyone in every country behave, which is adorable. The United States already passed a law banning space ads back in 2000, after a company wanted to display a billboard during the Olympics. Nothing says international unity like a giant floating Snickers bar. The problem is, if your country bans space billboards and another country doesn't, the ads still float over your head because, space doesn't have borders and all. So unless we get a global ban on space advertisement, we might be soon stuck with the celestial version of pop-up ads. Astronomers won't be able to do, astronomy here on Earth, and the sky will be full of lasers. Hopefully not dangerous ones. So there you go. The stars are disappearing, and instead of naming new constellations, we're branding them. Now, I'd say any company or anyone who uses satellite lasers to advertise in the sky is a Sagittarius A hole. Get it? Because Sagittarius A is the black hole at the center of our galaxy. Yeah, see what I did there? You're welcome. I have some news that hits close to the soul and then keeps hitting, like a cymbal crash with no release. Imagine being trapped in a musical purgatory, forced to listen to some half-assed cover of Wonderwall every day outside your window until you either lose your mind or learn to speak fluent Oasis. So let's travel to England and welcome you to Leicester Square, basically London's version of Times Square, if Times Square was smaller, wetter, and had slightly more accordion. A judge in the UK just ruled that the endless stream of loud, repetitive busking outside an office at Leicester Square is, quote, psychological torture. Yes, a judge ruled busking was torture, which honestly might be the first time a legal system recognized Maroon 5 as a war crime. Office workers outside the square told the court that things got so bad, some of them were working in cupboards to escape the noise. I mean, the last time someone in Britain was voluntarily in a closet this long, London was being bombed by the Germans. It was a long time ago. The judge referred to the busking as industrially amplified daily concerts, which is a very British way of saying the dudes outside need to shut up. The judge also compared it to illegal torture methods, which I assume means that somewhere a CIA agent just took notes and whispered, "Interesting." One local restaurant owner said the music made it impossible for his kids to sleep. Now, if you've ever tried parenting in a city, you'd know that silence is a luxury item. Forget private schools. I just want my kid to nap without a white guy in dreadlocks shouting, "No woman, no cry," like he's the joke auditioning on Got Talent or something. The same restaurant owner asked a busker to turn down the music, and the polite response that he got is not repeatable on the radio, which, lucky for you and me, means it was neither polite nor a response. It was shouting with profanity. Another witness said the singing was somehow worse than the instruments, which raises the question, what were the instruments? Was it one of those guys who plays the didgeridoo and the kazoo at the same time while balancing a sword? Because if that's the case, I withdraw the complaint and I'd offer him a slot on this show. The judge said the real problem was the repetition and the poor quality of the performances. And that hits hard. Because I've been told this show is both repetitive and poor in quality. But at least I don't use a guitar and an amplifier. Yet. Meanwhile, the council, who's supposed to be in charge of keeping the square under control, has done about as good a job at that as British people do at saying what they really mean. So, nothing. The council said they're trying to strike a balance between the joy of the street performance and the suffering of literally everyone around the square, which is what politicians might say before they continue to do absolutely nothing. To be fair, though, the council says they fined 7 people for 21 separate offenses and regularly seize equipment from unlicensed performers. I want to see what equipment they seized. Guitars? Cymbals? Buckets being played as drums? But considering the volume level of the buskers they didn't give a hard time, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a tuba. Now back to the people who live and work around Leicester Square who took the local council to court. The judge ruled that the council had completely dropped the ball, didn't even try to catch it. Just watched it roll down the street while someone with a portable speaker played Hallelujah for the 9th time in the morning. The judge says the council now has to actually do something to stop the musical madness. Though knowing bureaucracy, that probably means they'll commission a 78-page report titled Acoustic Vibrancy in Urban Spaces, a love letter to noise addressed to His Majesty the King, or something like that. I couldn't think of a better name of a report. So here's the final summary. A London court just declared that forcing people to listen to bad music over and over in a square counts as psychological torture, and not in the metaphorical, this wedding DJ is killing me way, but in the actual legal sense, which is historic, really. For the first time, a judge has looked at a guy covering Ed Sheeran outside a pret-a-manger and said, this is literally a human rights violation. It's a win for the little guy and a gentle warning to any future buskers out there. If you're going to loop the same 3 chords all day, you better learn to tune your guitar first, or risk having your amp taken away and your soul condemned by a judge with tinnitus. Up next, how to talk to a conspiracy theorist. Tips for dealing with someone who's fallen off the deep end. We'll tell you what those are after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Your nightly dose of unfiltered opinions and unexpected conversations. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Your Aunt Millie believes the earth is flat. She's in your face about it. But how do you get through Thanksgiving? That's what we'll discuss today on Conspiracy Corner with Dr. Lee Kuhnle, a political science professor at Humber Polytechnic and co-host of the Uncover Up podcast. You can find that wherever podcasts are eaten, digested, consumed. Lee, what a pleasure it is to join me for Thanksgiving today.
David, it's always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
April Fools, it's not Thanksgiving. Okay, I need to do better with the humor. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good. I really like our topic today, how to talk to someone who has fallen victim to conspiracy theories, because I feel like now more than ever, you don't know what's true. That's probably always been true, but we had the blinders on. You know, before the internet, before social media, I'm sure conspiracy theories were out there, but we had this like bliss. Now it feels like the most sane people I know sometimes spew the most ridiculous garbage.
Yeah, they really seem to be everywhere. And I'm sure that a lot of your listeners are going to have friends, family members who have gone off the deep end, as it were, who've really started to believe in an absolutely implausible theory of how the world works. And you mentioned flat earthers, but, they come in all guises. We have family members who are hardcore climate deniers or who believe that the COVID vaccine and its boosters are secretly tracking us, or deep state theories, all this kind of stuff.
It doesn't help that when certain government files are released, like the JFK files, there's stuff in there that is like, whoa, the government was doing that, which kind of primes us to believe things even if they aren't true.
Well, and I think you start at a really helpful place, which is actually having just a moment of empathy that even some of these more bizarre theories have often some kind of factual support. Even though the theory is incorrect, there's often enough historical precedent that makes you think, well, hold on a second. If I know that these things are true, then maybe all this other stuff is also the case. This is, I often call MK Ultra, this mind control activity that the CIA was illegally doing for around 20 years in Canada and the United States. It really happened. And I see this as the conspiratorial gateway drug. Like, if you know that went down, then yeah, maybe the moon landing is fake, and maybe 9/11 was an inside job, and maybe the COVID lockdown was actually in order to create a world government or 5Gs or something like that.
Sometimes it's hard to talk to folks. Like, I imagine some people who have family members on different sides of the political spectrum, when they assemble for Christmas, when they assemble for weddings, some people just kind of force you to enter their narrative and enter their world to even just have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Like I remember when we were wearing masks during COVID to stop the spread, or slow down the spread. Of course, a little bit of air is going to come out of the mask. Of course, people are going to get sick when they wear masks, but it reduces the spread. But I had one friend, like, if you just show up wearing a mask, it's a confrontation. And I think that leads nicely into our topic. Like, how do you break bread with someone like that? How do you talk to them? How do you get through to them? Is there no getting through? And if there's no getting through, how do you go forward? These are the questions that kind of swirl around for me.
Exactly. And I think for a lot of us, because this is really the new normal now. And I can tell you a couple of things that over the years I've discovered really don't work. One of the things that really does not work is just coming down on people with a whole bunch of reasons why they are wrong. Now, as somebody who works in higher education, I'm a professor, I teach. This came as a kind of an existential crisis, this recognition that you can't change people's minds necessarily just by providing them with better facts and reasons, that doesn't work, shook me to my core.
I feel like that's the academic trap. Like, you're a professor and the trap is, oh, I'm a professor, I study things. If I present people with facts, they'll believe them because that's how my mind works. Like, that is such a trap. That's not how everyone thinks.
That is not how everyone thinks, including actually also professors. It's how we like to think that we think. But in reality, we are as liable as anybody else to believe silly things, to believe incorrect theories, to not be self-aware about that too. So this put me as a professional in really to the sword. I was like, what am I doing? So I started to actually try and investigate this and look at some of the research behind it. What is it that is preventing people from changing their minds? And what strategies can we use? So one thing that doesn't work, badgering them with facts. The other thing that doesn't work, and I know that this is obvious when you say it, but the other thing that doesn't work is making fun of them, which is sometimes a really tempting strategy. Like if you watch most of the shows like John Oliver or, those kinds of...
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about flat earthers here, and we're like, at the beginning to kind of in a silly way set up this interview, but there are people who believe that, and you're right. No one likes being made fun of, even if they're wrong.
No, exactly. Nobody likes being made fun of. And what that tends to do is push people more into a conspiratorial community than break them out of it. Now, I think one thing that really helped me understand what's going on and why these ideas tend to be so resistant to facts, fact-checking, debunking, that kind of stuff, is that there is something much more fundamental at play. And I'll throw out two ideas. One we have talked about before, and that's the centrality of community, that ideologies aren't like personal things. They're actually the glue that connects me to an entire social world, which includes friends, it includes romantic partners, or at least the possibility of that. It includes family, it includes work. And so sometimes when we are attacking a certain kind of ideology or trying to dismantle it or show that it is incorrect, the response ends up being quite emotional because it's attacking somebody's direct connection to their community, to their friends, to their access to a job, things like that.
That's something to really think about when you make fun of someone for their beliefs, even if they're ridiculous. It's not just something that they believe and they want to talk to you about. It may well be something that connects them to their community. Even if it's a community online of very strange people, it's still something that connects them to their community. So a little empathy, just no matter how crazy the belief you think it is.
Yeah. Now, with some beliefs, you're going to say, listen, I cannot be empathetic to that belief. Like there are some beliefs that are so obnoxious, that are
hateful, problematic,
that are so hateful. And yet I'm going to suggest a strategy forward there as well.
Ooh, I'm excited about that.
Right? Now, so to get there, I said there were two things that often connect us to these conspiratorial ideas. The other one is a certain kind of pain or trauma that a conspiracy theory sometimes can make sense of a tragedy that's happened to us. And that's not something that's always on the surface when you're having a conversation with somebody. Let me give you a really quick example of this. So my dad, his second wife had some kind of heart problem, and they spent literally years going from specialist to specialist trying to figure it out. And they couldn't get a satisfactory answer. They would often just be getting pills to deal with some kind of symptoms, but nobody would address the underlying problem. And after about a year or two of this, my dad started talking about, quote unquote, big pharma and how they actually had the cure for all kinds of things, but they were keeping it from us in order that they could make more money. Now, you could see there that the conspiracy theory was actually solving a kind of a problem in his life.
Yeah.
Now, it's not the kind of thing he leads with in a conversation, but because I'm his son and I knew this was going on, it helped me understand how to talk to him a bit better.
That's amazing. So if you make fun of the conspiracy theory, you're attacking his sort of traumatic connection to his wife having a heart problem. Something to think about no matter what someone believes. I'm here with Dr. Lee Kuhnle. It's Conspiracy Corner. We are discussing how to talk to a conspiracy theorist. When we come back, we'll discuss how to connect with people whose beliefs in conspiracy theories are connected to pain.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Your nightly rebellion against predictable radio and podcasts. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Imagine you're at Thanksgiving and your uncle starts telling you that birds aren't real. And he's in your face about it. How do you get through that family meal? That's kind of what we're discussing here. How to talk to a conspiracy theorist. That's our topic on Conspiracy Corner with Dr. Lee Kuhnle, a political science professor at Humber Polytechnic. Check out his podcast, The Uncover Up. It's all about conspiracies. Just look that up. Uncover Up. It's a lot of the words up in this introduction. Lee, welcome back, my friend.
Thanks, David.
Before the break, you were sharing an intimate story. You were talking about how your father developed a conspiratorial belief that Big Pharma was out to get you and Big Pharma was withholding cures that they had. But it was connecting him to a traumatic life event, his wife having heart trouble and not really knowing how to solve it. So you make fun of him for this conspiracy theory that he believes. You're actually like attacking him with a very sensitive and delicate belief. And I think that's one way to look at attacking people who believe in what to you is stupid stuff.
Exactly. And what this story demonstrated to me is something that in the literature that looks at this kind of stuff is actually really well known, which is that often what's really happening underneath it is that these ideas, these ideologies, these incorrect beliefs about how the world works is actually solving a deeper problem that somebody is facing. And it's one that you and I, as just an interlocutor sitting at, Thanksgiving and having a chat with somebody, are maybe not really aware of. And I, did this Thanksgiving example, this actually happened. In my family, so of course, like many others, we have members in our family who have really gone whole hog with the climate change is not real and the COVID vaccine is dangerous and all of these kinds of things. And okay, I will admit it was Thanksgiving dinner. And because of that, I had a little too much to drink.
Oh boy.
And so I said, well, what's the problem with making the world better? Like what, even if it's all incorrect, what's the problem?
Oh, with climate change.
With climate change in this case.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, even if the people who study climate change are wrong and it's not real, like not polluting is a good thing.
It seems like it, right? But again, here, there was a really important piece of the story that was missing. In this case, this person is somebody who has throughout their life been really interested in nature, is a nature photographer, takes pictures of migrating birds here in Ontario, and was really upset. So this is the background that you generally don't get to hear about. Was really upset at the wind turbines and where they were being placed. What was happening was they were getting in the way of migrating birds. And so she's going out and she's literally finding, dead birds lying on the ground. And so she starts Googling, why are the wind turbines being placed in these clearly migratory paths? And this connected her to more and more critical and then more and more conspiratorial interpretations of what was going on.
Yeah, I've heard this one, that wind energy is somehow causing bad stuff.
Well, in this case, it was just simply they weren't really paying attention to other factors like how birds migrate. Sure. And so they were interrupting their flight and they were actually like flying into the turbines. And anyway, this indicated again that there was like a real kind of underlying pain that led her to start questioning what's really going on here. And before the break, I noted that, there are these beliefs where it is really hard to give somebody too much credit. I mean, as you were saying, hateful beliefs, ones that call for violence. And yet I want to suggest in some cases, underneath it, what this is doing for the person who believes it is solving a kind of problem that they're experiencing in their life, like with this family member at Thanksgiving dinner, like with my dad and his trouble finding a cure for his partner. And so the solution here, this is where we actually get a piece of actual advice, like how can you talk to somebody who believes things that you know to be totally incorrect? The best idea that I have encountered so far is to acknowledge the pain that underlies it, to see if you can identify that, acknowledge it, but not necessarily the theory that then tries to make sense of it. So back to my dad, I could say things which I didn't know at the time. And so I totally did it wrong. But I could say things like, this is really frustrating. And the fact that your partner isn't getting the treatment she needs is scary. And I get that the doctors are not always taking the time that they need to kind of get to know your particular situation. So I'm acknowledging a lot of the issues that have led him to develop this theory without then necessarily going that next step and acknowledging his interpretation of what's going on. And when the few times I have done this well, because I have to be very honest here, being on radio, talking to a lot of people, I am not good at this. And so when my mom phoned me during the lockdown to say that she was vaccine hesitant, I lost it. And I just came down on her like a ton of bricks with all these facts and all these arguments. And we didn't talk for like 2 months afterwards. Things are fine now. We're talking again. But what I needed to do, I think, was acknowledge, yeah, this is scary. We're not medical scientists. We don't know how this kind of stuff works. It does seem like it's going really fast. It is a foreign subject, all these kinds of things without then having to go to, oh yeah, this is clearly the deep state that is doing this to us. And,
Bill Gates with the tracking chips and all that.
Exactly. So acknowledge the pain, acknowledge the trauma, acknowledge what the conspiracy is trying to solve without then having to go. And if you do this well, and it is rarely, but occasionally this has happened to me, when you secede some ground, when you give some ground, remarkably, sometimes the person will actually follow you a bit and be like, that you're right. Maybe it isn't that the big pharma is messing with us. And so it's quite remarkable how our own participation in this discursive dynamic can kind of set up how the conversation's going to go.
It's interesting, and I like how you give two examples for how people can look a little deeper. One is it's someone trying to find community, and two is there might be some traumatic event or some difficult thing in their life that's connected to this belief. And if you look a little deeper, those are two ideas. There may be others. There may be other deeper things, but those are two amazing ones. And thanks for sharing those personal stories.
You're very welcome. And I just wanted to add to that sometimes what's happening is both of these things are happening. Is that the pain has led people to a certain conspiratorial community, or the alienation from their other community has generated a certain amount of pain, which then their conspiratorial community is able to ameliorate in some way.
What does ameliorate mean? You're using all these big professor words.
I'm sorry. You know what? What if I don't even know the answer? Maybe this is okay. Make lessen the damage, lessen the severity of. I'm sorry. That's embarrassing.
No, it's okay. Sometimes I use words and people ask me what the words mean and I don't know.
I'm pink now.
I know that I used it right, but I'm like, I couldn't give you a great definition.
Yeah, no,
sometimes I use them wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
Lee, what a pleasure it was having you on the show. You can find Dr. Lee Kuhnle's podcast is called the Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. Lee, what would you say the average episode of the Uncover Up contains?
We do a lot of alien stuff because we love that. But every year we're trying to identify a theme. This year it is the end of the world, although we have standalone episodes as well. And in each one we try and bring facts and empathy.
Lee, thanks so much for joining me, my friend. Up next, hot off the presses, people have tried the 4-day work week. And guess what? It's a success. It's not just for lazy people. Employees are just as productive, more happy, and we'll find out next in a moment why and how you might get a job that only works 4 days in a week.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Prepare to have your mind blown as we delve into the complexities of relationships, explore the cutting edge of science, and celebrate the bizarre and beautiful absurdity of the world around us. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Want to work one less day a week for the same-ish pay? Well, maybe you can. Work is changing. People want more time for life, not time in the office. So could a 4-day work week be the key to happiness? Or are people asking for Fridays off and just kind of being lazy? I am here with someone who has written a book, Do More in 4, Why It's Time for a Shorter Work Week, that's available wherever books are sold. For pre-order, his name is Jared Lindzon. Jared, first of all, welcome to the show. And then tell me a little about this 4-day work week. I have heard about it before.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It is a thing that I don't think a lot of people had heard about up until quite recently, and it's been gaining momentum, largely thanks to my co-author, a guy named Joe O'Connor. He's been running these trials all around the world in North America, Europe, getting a whole bunch of companies together to do the 4-day thing and see how it goes. Under very specific circumstances, I want to address what you said in the intro there. If you just tell everybody that you can have a day off, you will not get more work done. But the book offers a template for rearranging and reorganizing work in a way where you can actually accomplish more in less time.
I actually think it's a great idea. And I do know of one mainstream-ish company that does it. It's called Kickstarter. It's for like raising money for little projects and campaigns and apps and devices. I don't actually think people who advocate for this are lazy. I think they're advocating for a better work-life balance, but I think there are those out there who are like, get back to work. Let's start here. How does your co-author convince a company to have their employees work one less day a week?
There's usually 3 main reasons why an organization might choose to go in this direction, and it's to solve very specific problems. So those 3 big categories are struggling really hard to recruit and retain top talent. We find that happens a lot in like the tech industry. If you're a mid-sized firm competing for the same engineers as Facebook, Google, and Amazon, remote work, you're never going to get there. Salary, you're never going to beat them on that. But maybe if you could offer 4 days of work instead of 5 at a normal salary range, maybe you can get some of the best and brightest in the industry. And for some organizations, that is more than the 20% time loss made up for in having those A players on their roster. The next big category, burnout and, mental health issues. There's some industries in particular, but, a lot of industries are dealing with some significant mental health challenges in the workplace. And, sometimes it's like people are kind of bummed out and morale's kind of low and productivity is lagging, which is a problem. But other times it's like we're losing our staff on pretty regular intervals. We can't keep our top talent because we're pushing them to the bone and they are falling out of the workforce. Find that in law firms, nonprofit organizations, like particularly difficult jobs. Having that one extra day off per week can keep some of your best employees in the job for longer. And for some organizations, that alone pays for itself in terms of reducing the work week. And finally, we find a lot of organizations these days are trying to make like big changes at their company. We've got this new AI tool. We've got this new way of working. It's going to make everybody more productive. And people are looking around going, why am I going to help them do this thing that might put my job at risk? And it's only going to enrich the shareholders and add to the bottom line. I'm not going to see a part of that. Maybe my job's a bit more secure, but maybe not. So a lot of organizations are saying, we want to make this whole organization more effective by doing things very differently. And in order to get everybody rowing in the same direction on board for these big changes, they say, if you help us with that, we will bring in a 4-day work week.
Latching on to burnout and choosing a job that makes your life a little better versus maximizing for income. Having previously been married, now happily divorced to a lawyer, watching her and her peers assess jobs over what their life was going to be like and not the salary, like they would take a job that paid 75% of what another job did if it was a decent one. And I kind of get it. Like, some people aren't trying to maximize for salary. They're trying to like spend time with their kids, trying to do their hobbies, trying to be with their friends, and not trying to be in a job with burnout. I think we saw this in the pandemic with the Great Resignation, as it was called. It's such a funny name. People were looking at their jobs and saying, no, I don't want to do this. People who did that now looking for new jobs. Do you think like a 4-day work week could entice talent, that's sort of top talent, that just said no to a crappy job?
Yeah, absolutely. We find that so many organizations adopted this during the Great Resignation in order to stop the bleeding, because the cost of replacing these workers was astronomical. And if they could do things, if they could find ways to get as much done in 4 days and offer their staff that extra day off, they were able to keep and actually sort of poach some of the best talent in their industry. And then, on the burnout side of things, one of the companies we profile in this book is actually a law firm based in Vancouver, whose founder is like, serious go-getter. She's not looking for like a health and wellness, program to improve their employees' lives, but they're in family law, which is like one of the most taxing jobs statistically in the world.
All right. Isn't it the highest rate of murder for lawyers, for clients who kill their lawyers, not criminal lawyers, but family attorneys, divorce lawyers?
I wouldn't believe that. I don't know that statistic's true. I know that they have higher rates of addiction and mental health issues than other lawyers, which already have higher rates of addiction and mental health issues than everybody else. So like, these people are really at risk of just totally burning out, dropping out of the workforce. And that was happening at this law firm that was like, really struggling to maintain continuity because they were losing their best people all the time. So there are situations where this makes a lot of sense.
What would you say to someone? I feel like it's a deeply American value. Like, you deserve -1 vacation days a year. You should work 12-hour days, get back to work. You're lazy. Don't ever take vacation. It's sort of the opposite of the European model, where they take 13 months off of the year. What would you say to someone who just scoffed at this, and anyone who was advocating for it? They would say to you, you just don't want to work.
First of all, scoff away. I've heard it all. But you'll be scoffing while others are finding ways to use this to their advantage. So go for it. Same with remote work. I've been there before, reporting on remote work, doing the remote work thing, advocating for it before the pandemic. Not a popular idea. And all of a sudden, people can't live without it. The other thing I would say, though, is one of the most compelling data points, though, is this OECD study, which looked at the number of hours worked by country. And if you compare that data against GDP and GDP per capita, basically like how healthy, wealthy, and happy people are, you find almost a negative correlation, where the countries that work the most hours actually have the worst economies and the least happy citizenry. So if you look at just Europe in general, the highest hours worked are countries like Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany. Some of the largest economies in the bloc work the fewest hours, whereas the other end of the spectrum, I believe it's Greece, who works the most hours, actually has one of the weakest economies. And you see this all around the world, in Mexico, in Korea. There's different places around the world where working hours are through the roof, but GDP per capita, national GDP, these are much lower than the average. So there's actually a global disconnect. Interestingly, though, the one major outlier, the one country that has crazy hours worked and a really strong economy, is the good old US of A, which has a lot to do with unionization and how hard it is for a large portion of the population to get a day off when they really deserve one or need one. But that's a total outlier to the global trend.
How would you design the ideal 4-day work week schedule? What would it be in terms of hours, breaks, and things like that?
Oh, we have so much data to point to in this book. So I would first suggest reading the book, because we've got chapters on this. There are scientifically backed ways of breaking up your schedule to get the most done in the least amount of time, to really focus on maximizing each hour. It's too much to cram into this interview, but if you pick up the book, you'll get a full rundown.
Cool. Well, Do More in 4, Why It's Time for a Shorter Work Week is authored by Jared Lindzon. That's available for pre-order wherever books are sold. Jared, thanks for talking to me. I myself would love to do a 4-day work week. I'm going to tell, a bunch of the radio stations this show is on.
I'm doing my best to get that for you.
Thanks, Jared.
My pleasure. Have a good one.
After the break, tiny robots doing brain surgery powered by magnets and not motors that are the size of a pencil. What? This sounds more like science fiction than science reality. But medical devices like these might be in your head soon. We'll give you the scoop up next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Your above-average intelligence brought you here. It deserves above-average absurdity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Cutting into someone's brain sounds a little scary, but what if we didn't have to? Well, a team of scientists has built tiny robot tools that move like magnets, not motors, and enter your brain for surgery. I'm here with someone who worked on that. His name is Dr. Eric Diller. He's a mechanical engineering professor at University of Toronto. Eric, thanks for talking to me today about tiny brain robots.
Happy to be here, David.
So what inspires the development of tiny magnetic tools for brain surgery? What problem are you trying to solve?
We're trying to make smaller tools to go into the body where we don't have to cut a big hole to get in there, and we can access through a small hole, do the same kind of surgeries, but less cutting.
Most of us picture brain surgery as like this highly invasive, very intricate, requiring a high amount of skills surgery to do. Can you walk me through how your tool might change that mental image of an open brain with surgeons poking around with scalpels? What would surgery look like with these from the patient's perspective?
Yeah, you're right that many brain surgeries do require removing a big portion of the skull, pushing aside a large amount of brain tissue to get access deep inside. But our vision is that we could either inject or, for now, just introduce a tool through a small tube which can go deep into the brain and have tiny hands that can manipulate, pull, and cut on the tissue where we need to, and drive it all through the brain with magnetic fields.
Oh my God, there's so many cool things you just mentioned. So let's start with the small tools. Like, how big are we talking? A centimeter, a millimeter? How big are these things that would actually go in the brain?
Yeah, we're building tools that are 3 millimeters across. So this is about half the width of a pencil.
Wow.
So they're real small, but big enough to be able to pull on the tissue and do cutting.
And magnetic fields instead of motors? I imagine the little robots would be these autonomous things with motors or whatnot. Where do magnetic fields come in?
Yeah, lots of people are trying to make surgical robots, and there's surgical robots being used in clinics around the world now that are driven by motors with cables pulling on pulleys and joints within the tools. It's hard to make them really small, a few millimeters. It's really tiny to make tiny pulleys and mechanisms that small. So we've been inspired by wireless magnetic devices and how we can use the magnetic field to simplify the tiny surgical robot to just being a few joints with magnets connecting them. And this can allow us to make our tools quarter the size, half the size of traditional motor-driven tools, but still have them move in the same way.
Let me dumb this down mostly for myself because I'm an idiot. Instead of little motors and hinges that work autonomously or that are battery powered, instead you're kind of pushing it with magnetic fields, like the magnets make the little bits in the robot move rather than some internal component?
Yeah, imagine if you glued a magnet onto your wrist and put it in a near another large magnet, it would pull your wrist into a certain angle. So we can do the same thing, but we can do it precisely using a bunch of magnets outside the body. So we built a large table with a bunch of electromagnets inside it that would be the operating table. And the surgeon puts their head on top of this table, and it can generate magnetic fields through the skull and pull all the joints of this robot to whatever angle we want them.
This is so cool. I imagine you're not testing it on people quite yet. What kinds of materials have you tested it on, and how are the tests going?
Yeah, we test in our lab using rubber brains. So artificial brains that are simulating properties of real tissue. We talk to surgeons and we have surgeons on our team who are developing this project with us, who tell us the best materials to use that they use in training new surgeons on how to operate. So this is how we've developed our tools, and we're moving forward doing further testing, which we'd like to be able to do human testing in the coming years.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. It's all fun and well you've got it in a lab at a university, but how soon could we see robots like this in actual operating rooms, working on things like brain cancers or any kind of sensitive, delicate brain surgeries? How far away are we, and what difficult hurdles do we have ahead?
We need to make sure that they work and that they're safe, which are both very difficult things.
Those do seem like they're slightly important, both of those points.
Yeah, so we're confident that our device can do these steps in the lab. What's really difficult and takes years and sometimes decades is proving that medical devices can be safe for operation, that they're actually useful and better than existing procedures. And other surgical robots, the first surgical robots took decades to develop and commercialize. There's new surgical robots that are on shorter timelines, but it's still measured in many years and not months.
So you're hoping to see it soon, but not next week is what you're telling me.
That's right.
Are there ethical and safety considerations here? Are the robots autonomous? Are they operated by surgeons? Are they going to replace experienced surgeons? I know I just launched like 100 questions at you, but could you speak to that?
Great question. Our device is not an autonomous robot. It'd be driven by the surgeon. So whatever a surgeon is doing currently, where they would manipulate tools with their hands, we'd be putting the surgeon at a console where they would drive some controls like joysticks, which would move our robotic tool in tandem with how their hands are moving.
I imagine even after they're ready, the surgeons would have to be trained, and that might take a long time as well.
Sure, and there's a bit of a revolution going on with surgical robots that are a bit bigger than ours in other areas of the body, which does require new surgeon training on how to use those tools, just like surgeons would learn to use various other new technologies.
Are there any ethical considerations here on driving tools by magnets in the brain, or is it just kind of the safety level of a scalpel once these things are proven?
I mean, we want to make sure that they're safe. What do we do if the power turns out during the procedure? What do we do in the case of something breaking? So we want to build in safety to our devices. And one of the reasons we like to use magnetic fields to drive them is that they're kind of inherently safe. We actually struggle to get enough force to cut brain tissue with these tools. So it's very difficult for the tool to, even the most wild inputs you could give to it aren't going to tear a big hole through the brain tissue in an unknown kind of way.
This project sounds something like it's out of science fiction. I mean, I'm a sci-fi junkie. I'm imagining people on the med bed with the robot operating on the brain. Do you ever work on this and have a moment to yourself where you think, wow, like this could actually work and this is the future of medicine?
Yeah, that's what we think of every day. Our long-term vision is to have versions of these that could be injected into the body through just a needle hole and driven wirelessly and swim around through the body.
Would I have one in my body just while I'm healthy, and the second I'm sick, it would, activate? And I mean, it's the beginning of a potential technology that could really be the future of medicine, like nanobots, and I guess perhaps magnetically controlled ones at that.
I think in the foreseeable future, we'll be putting them in only when needed.
I understand, but like when Edison created the light bulb, he didn't think of like the nuclear power plant powering the data center. I'm just saying it's the beginning of something very exciting in medicine.
Yeah, you can imagine doing continual diagnosis and monitoring with tools that we embed in your body.
What's your dream scenario in the next, 10, 20 years for this tech?
My dream is that we can do, with this specific project, that we can do neurosurgery without cutting your skull open, and this will be done in clinics, in hospitals around the world, but that also this magnetically driven tools can replace all sorts of other procedures like colonoscopies.
Oh boy, I wish you'd hit that at the beginning of the interview. I could have cracked all kinds of jokes about colonoscopies, but maybe you were smart not to. Eric, thanks for talking to me about what you're working on. It sounds really interesting.
Thanks for having me, David.
Dr. Eric Diller is a mechanical engineering professor at the University of Toronto. Up next, things are going to get hot. Things are going to get steamy. Things are going to get all about breakup sex. So stick around, get your ex-husband or get your ex-wife on speed dial. Do people even use speed dial anymore? Because you're not going to want to miss this.
Want to be Part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Explore your deepest desires, if you dare. The Last Show with David Cooper.
It's Sex, Etc. Samantha Bitty, sexual health and consent educator, is here. Samantha, I think you and I have to break up. Oh, how's that for a setup? Pretty good. Welcome to the show.
Maybe we will break up.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. I'm polyamorous. You know that.
Good. All right. Breakup sex. I'm trying to think here. I guess I've had it once, but I was like maybe 19 or 20. I can't remember, but this is something that people talk about. And my goodness, is this in the media? Like every TV show, every movie, breakup sex. They joke about it. They do it. They talk about it. Is it as prevalent? Does it happen as much as TV would have you believe, Samantha?
I really think so. I mean,
Really?
it depends on the person.
I'm missing out.
Yeah, it depends on the person and the people, right? Like, and what happened to cause the breakup. Like certain things are like, too volatile, or it makes the dry or whatever. But and it depends it depends on the breakup. It depends on the people. But I definitely believe in the culture of when you're going to have, a closure conversation, or you're going to break up in person. Like, I'm very much the kind of person where if I've been in a relationship and the relationship has to end in the current form that it's in, and there's the option to have a phone call or to meet in person, I'm very much like let's do this face to face. Either because I'm trying to smash, intentionally, it's like, okay, let me get it in like one more time, or I want to terrorize the person that the relationship is ending with.
Well, the second one I admire. I think the wider conversation here is being good at breaking up, being a good breaker-upper, being a good break-uppy. I guess I'm not. And so the opportunity to after a breakup has just never presented itself.
Yeah, and the thing of being a good at breaking up, one of the traits of a quote unquote good breakup that I've identified is not acting from urgency, right? Like you can decide that a relationship is done, but having the alleged closure, debrief, whatever type conversation, like that doesn't need to happen urgently. My most successful departures from relationships, the ones where the relationship gets to change shape and that we get to stay in each other's lives in a loving and sustainable way, have been when there has been pause around that conversation.
That's what I'm doing wrong.
And the urgency feels very real, right? Like I know, and I do think that this comes back to that the personality traits of people. I am very much I need to talk about everything right away.
Me
I
too.
don't want, and then some people are like, I need space and time. And the person who needs space and time is always given like primacy, like their need is always given like privilege in that situation. And so I'm a big proponent for coming to an agreement somewhere around the middle where the person who feels urgent says, I hear your need for space. I respect and honor that. My urgency also needs to be respected and honored. Can we set a timeline?
Here you are saying urgency should be honored, but then on the other hand, you're saying if you don't have urgency, you open yourself up for better breakup sex. So there's a bit of a divide there, but that's not a problem. We all have our...
I didn't say that.
No?
I didn't say that.
Okay, I put words in your mouth. Please correct me.
What I said was having an effective breakup where the relationship can change shape and you can stay in each other's lives requires pause. Breakup sex is, I think, more likely in urgency in some ways.
Okay.
And I can only I can only speak from my experiences and the experiences of the people that have shared this information with me in terms of how their breakups have gone.
Sure.
And there are certain trends. Like there are certain types of people who are more inclined to have breakup sex. I think fire signs are more inclined to have breakup sex. Having heightened emotions is a turn on. And so it's like also doing something you shouldn't do. All of those things are aphrodisiacs. I so we're having two different conversations.
Yeah, we are. How to break up good, but it's to facilitate good breakup sex. So let's get back to the thing the thing that I've missed. I've had broken up sex. That's always good because I had it with Miranda the last time we broke up when we were kind of, courting to get back together. That was good. That was great because there's a lot of yearning, longing. I miss you. But when we broke up, no, nothing like that. Just tears and yelling, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, see, for me, the tears and yelling is what makes my wet. It's like, I need, as long as there's a conclusion, it's either, for me, it can go either way. If there's no resolution and we need to like it out to be not angry or not hurt anymore, and then you cry after, there's that one. Or there's the one where you've seen each other as whole, you've held space for each other, you've talked about what was good in the relationship as well. You're like, oh, I'm going to miss you so much. And then you smash. Like, both are good.
Wait, there are flavors of breakup sex? There's like a wholesome, I see you as a person but can't be with you and respect you and want you to be happy, and so let's make love. And then there's, I hate your guts, let's smash. Is that what you're saying?
When you're dating me, yes. Yes. There's probably a secret third one too that I'm not allowed to say on air.
Oh boy.
It's so, I find that when we have these conversations, because you and I are friends, it's harder for me to give the advice as like a professional relationship expert, as opposed to just, well, this is what I be doing.
All right. I mean, what would you teach a university class of students about breakup sex? I feel like this topic is on a deep level very personal. Like, it's not maybe it has been studied. Who knows? Maybe I'll Google that at the break. Official, published, reviewed studies on breakup sex. I wonder what conclusions people can make.
There's definitely a human behavior element, a human sexuality element, and our sexuality, our dispositions, our little whatevers are so unique to our experience and to the relationships. And there are people that I've had breakups with where, as you said, in that urgent moment of the breakup, there's no chance, like 0% chance are we gonna get into it.
Do it. What are we, 4 years old?
Air quotes, doing it. Did you guys do it? But then the broken up period, when you're, rebounding, or you haven't found your new thing yet, or maybe you miss the familiarity, maybe the sex was really great. I've rarely ever broken up with someone when the sex was still good. So I really speak to that experience.
Bad advice to be giving people. Stay with them if the sex is good. I'm going to put that as an official. You said that. You said it for you.
I didn't say that. I said for me, but I am not. There's a difference between what is the education and guidance that I provide others and what I get up to in my human woman flawed being. It doesn't mean that I'm doing the things that are most sustainable or most loving or most principled or most boundaried. Like, I'm a human. I had breakup sex the other day. Was that the right choice? It was the right choice for me in that moment. Here we are. Everything is information. And it gave me a lot of information about how I felt about that person, how I felt about that bond still, what I'm looking for moving forward. So I think breakup sex can be a fact-finding mission.
It's not funny. It's just such a wonderful quote. I'm seeing it like on your, testimonials. Maybe I get a pamphlet about you because I want to hire you. It's like, a 1-page brief on your quotes. Breakup sex can be a fact-finding mission. We're here with Samantha Bitty. It's Sex, Etc. We'll be back with more of whatever this is in a moment.
part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The show that asks the questions other shows are afraid to ask. The Last Show with David Cooper.
We are here with Samantha Bitty, sexual health consent educator. It is sex, comma, etc. Punctuation important there. Samantha, before the break, we were talking about breakup sex. You wanted to relate that to another topic, didn't you? Also, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, as I was saying before the break, I had breakup sex the other day, and it did reveal to me a lot about how I was feeling and how I felt when I was having sex with them while we were together, and then how it felt having sex with them in the breakup sex scenario, the potentially goodbye sex, but potentially like you might end up on my roster of harm reduction for 2025. I don't know. What I identified in myself, and this is something that has been shifting in me over the last, I would say 2 years minimum, but definitely since the pandemic, is that what is required from me emotionally to feel engaged and invested in sex with someone. And as someone who really enjoyed prior to this, sex for funsies, casual sex, totally fine, as long as there was mutual respect, all of those things. Like I can lean into physical chemistry without there being an emotional connection or bond per se. I was able to identify in myself that I'd enjoyed having sex with this person so much more before, when we were in the kind of like, oh, maybe we're falling in love place.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas knowing that we aren't, and knowing that our relationship was not going to progress in an emotional way moving forward, the sex, while physically, fun, satisfying, this person is lovely to I was like, oh, I'm actually really seeking something that is emotionally connected in order for me to enjoy sex in a certain way. And I also think some of that is my waning attraction to men. And again, this is just for me. And I've been investigating this thought for a while now, where I'm like, oh, am I demisexual? I'd never considered that as a thing because it was never relevant. And when we spoke last time about learning how to have sex in sobriety, even in the course of my sobriety, I've had plenty of casual sex that was just, heat of the moment for funsies, hookups, whatever, that I thoroughly enjoyed and felt present for. We change, we evolve. And I am curious about, the season I'm in life, where I'm like, oh, I actually really want to and need to feel an emotional connection with someone in order to feel sexually attracted to and satisfied by them. And that's what demisexuality is.
There we go. The definition of demisexuality. There's a few other hyphen sexualities that are worth talking about. My friend always had a joke about, when I used to do stand-up, about sapiosexuals.
Yes.
And she said, you're only attracted to smart people. And she's like, well, the rest of us dummies, like dummies. And then it's like, well, sorry, can you define sapiosexual before I go on?
So a sapiosexual is allegedly someone who is only attracted to people that they find intellectually stimulating.
Barf. Anyway. So she was like, yeah, you put that on your Tinder profile or whatever, but you're not smart enough to realize that putting that on there makes you look like an idiot, which I liked. It was like a nice take. But then there's like asexuality, which I think can be defined very simply, but there's a lot more there. That's just not interested in sex, but maybe in companionship, maybe in partnership, maybe in kind of the traditional structures of a relationship without the smashing.
Yeah, and so an asexual or someone who's on the asexuality spectrum is going to not have a desire or interest in sex and sexual activity with others or even perhaps themselves. There's a range.
Yeah, is it a spectrum? Because some guys are like sex guys, you know? Like one of my closest friends is just like, he can't help himself. Like every time an attractive person's on TV or like he used to come home, my friend, I didn't live with him, but I knew his roommate, and she told me he used to come home and he'd be all excited, and his story for the day to tell his roommate was, I saw an attractive woman on the bus today. Like that was somehow an interesting story. Like this guy just sex all the time. He wasn't a pig, but I knew what was going on in his brain all the time. And I'm like, I'm different than you, you know? I get some people are just wired for sex like all the time. And I can take it or leave it. I like it, you know, but I also like sandwiches and soup.
You do love soup.
I do love soup.
Hypersexuality, it's one of those things where it can be pathologized based on your location, your gender,
Sure,
your sexuality.
sure.
What was it? What do they call? Oh yeah, nymphomania.
Yeah,
like that. Yeah.
You know Kellogg's, you know, like the cereal, the guy Harvey Kellogg used to like do awful things to young women who were just, you know, exploring their bodies, and their parents got up. What is considered hypersexuality 100 years ago is appalling, you know, so you're right, it does change.
Nosferatu. So I think the more interesting thing about the sexuality spectrum is the assumptions that get made about what someone who identifies along that spectrum is looking for, available for, will participate in. And a large misconception about folks who are asexual is that they don't crave or want romantic connection or companionship, as you said, or that they're unavailable for physical intimacy, or, you know, like it's the ideal, I think, when someone identifies in a certain sexual space is that it creates agency and autonomy, not limit them. And the thing that I find fascinating about my own experience with this of being like, oh my God, am I demisexual? is that I've always been host spirited. I've always been host spirited. And so I'm exploring what this means in myself. And I'm like, am I just perimenopausal? Like, what is going on? And this is why I say that breakup sex can be a fact-finding mission. And that it was revealed to me very important information about how I'm looking to move forward in my next relationships and sexual engagements.
Parallel or perpendicular or whatever. Is there another spectrum or spectra? I'm just using words I don't understand. For kind of like relationship orientation where you could be asexual and have a wholesome, partnered, really traditional looking life, or you could be hypersexual and want to be single, you know, like.
And vice versa. Like I think that the perfect example is like, I'm polyamorous and I am not having sex. Like I am not dating. I am the singlest polyamorous person I know in regards to my romantic and sexual connections, but the other types of connections that I have, the ways in which I don't centralize romantic or sexual relationships in my life, I'm still polyamorous, even when I'm not dating or having a bunch of sex with different people. The same way an asexual is still asexual if they choose to have sex. Like it's, as I said, the ideal is that these understandings of ourselves, these meaning-making concepts, allow us to have agency and autonomy, not limit what we can and cannot do.
My primary sexuality is soup, Samantha.
Every time I see a soup meme, you know you get it. You know I have to send it to you. It can be 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. I'm like, David needs to see this.
Yeah, I love soup. Samantha, it is such a pleasure being here with you. It is akin to soup. You know, I would say interviewing you is as good as some of the best soup. Is it as good as the best soup? But this is not an insult towards you. I just really love soup.
Accept that. Thank you.
Samantha Bitty is a sexual health and consent educator. Thank you for being here. Up next, teenagers use social media a lot, especially when growing up in poverty, growing up tough. But is that social media use a problem for them? Is TikTok a villain for teens with less? It's an interesting question, and one we'll tackle after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Don't let them tell you you have to change. Just because you feel a little strange.
Breaking down today's chaos with tomorrow's headlines. The last show with David Cooper.
Teenagers use social media a lot, especially those growing up in poverty. But is social media use a problem for these kids? Is TikTok really a villain here for teens who grow up with less? I'm here with someone who studied that. They're an assistant professor of interdisciplinary social science at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. His name is Dr. Sebastian Kurten. Sebastian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David.
So what made you want to explore this connection between poverty, social media, well-being? It's kind of an interesting trio of things. What made you want to look into it?
I think in the debate around social media, like poverty is a largely overlooked factor, or does not get as much attention as I think it should deserve. So for us, it was really interesting to look at, what is the effect among adolescents growing in poorer neighborhoods? Are they specifically disadvantaged? These were our motives, basically.
Was there an assumption that somehow if kids grew up in rougher scenarios, poorer neighborhoods, that social media use would cause them more harm than it would kids who grew up middle class? Was that an assumption going in?
I mean, our initial assumption was very much it could go both ways, right? So our first, the assumption in the one direction would be, maybe if adolescents, if they grow up in a bit of rougher neighborhoods, poorer households, then maybe, the digital media, social media can be a tool for them to connect with others and, feel much better because maybe they lack the opportunities to, socialize in a club or in a nice neighborhood whatsoever. So that was the one assumption. The other assumption was, maybe it can go completely the other way. And social media kind of even has a more negative effect on them because then they even socialize even less or have even lower well-being. I can already say that neither of them proved to be true, but these were our initial ideas before we looked in the data.
So you found that social media use amongst teens with less doesn't really have an effect on them at all, but there are things that do have an effect on them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the difference we found, I think, it's a bit of a technical nuance. So what we actually looked at, among others, was whether the effect is more negative or, more positive. But basically what you have is you have a negative effect from social media use on the life satisfaction of adolescents. And so this effect is the same among adolescents growing up in poorer households than in the ones that are better off. But when you have two adolescents and they use social media the exact same way, and one of them grows up in a poorer household than the other one, the one growing up in the poorer household is still worse off.
Sure.
So this was our, we wanted to put poverty a bit back and say, but there's still a structural disadvantage among those.
Material deprivation. What is it and why is it such a powerful lens at looking at teens and how they're doing in life?
Yeah, so material deprivation very much is like one way of measuring poverty. Like I use deprivation and poverty slightly synonymously in as we speak, but actually deprivation is one way of assessing poverty. So what it really is you look at certain indicators. This is from the UK. They're called the indicators of multiple deprivation, I think. And so what it basically looks at is you've certain items, for example, on the household level. So you ask the parents the children, whether in their household, for example, they are able to pay the bills every month, whether they can, replace broken furniture, whether they can, save some money, whether they can go on holiday. And so it's always like a yes, no questions. And so if households say, oh, we cannot replace the furniture or we cannot go on a holiday, then we can speak of more deprived household, or if you want to put it like this, a bit rather poorer households than others.
Do you push back on the idea that screen time is kind of a universal villain? Why I feel like I sometimes on my show, peddle, oh, social media is bad for you, social media is bad for you, in many different ways. Do you think it's really the villain for teens that we think it is, especially looking at it through this lens and seeing there's not much of a difference?
I think the way to think about social media, we have some evidence that it is a small negative, we can have a small negative effect on adolescents. The way to think about it is why it can be bad is of opportunity costs. Or in other words, children don't do anything else while they are on social media. So children could do something better. So if you would compare a child or like an adolescent, being 1 hour on social media is probably less good than 1 hour being outside, meeting friends, riding a bike, these kind of things. So I think this is a lot why we see these negative effects in the data. And I don't think it's a universal villain. It's rather also it varies from case to case. And to see, okay, what could we do? What could children do besides just being on social media?
Benefits that actually might be conferred to teens, like connecting with others or escapism or even opportunity. I mean, there are kids that use social media as a means to make money. Are these something that could be offered to teens who are impoverished and maybe make social media less of a villain even more?
Yeah, I think there are definitely applications where social media can do good. One thing I think about is, for example, marginalized communities. For example, you live in a very rural area, and maybe you are the only, the only teen within the next, 20 kilometers who identifies, for example, as LGBTQ or something like that, or you have a very specific hobby. Maybe you're into wood carvery. And you're like, hey, can I connect with my peers who are also into wood carvery or, are part of some minorities or interest groups? And then it's great to connect with peers with similar interests.
You used a decade's worth of data, I think over 23,000 teens. What's it like working with data on that scale?
Yeah, it's a lot of data cleaning, data programming. It's a lot of just writing code. And in a way, it's interesting due to two ways. First, you have the data dating back for a very long time. So you have the advantage that you can make quite robust conclusions based on that. But the disadvantage is you use kind of not very sophisticated measures, because the measure we use, it was introduced 10 years ago. So on a scale from 1 to 5, or how much time do you spend on social media? So that's not the state-of-the-art measurement. And so that's a limitation. So, but it's then also cool to look at studies who don't date back that long, because then they can use more sophisticated measures.
Last question. If a policymaker listened to this conversation, what's the one thing you'd want them to take away about teens and their well-being with social media?
I think what a policymaker should take away is that when thinking about social media and adolescence, that we need to make offers to adolescents. I think a lot of the debate is just, smartphone bans at schools and these kind of ideas. But I think we should also give teens something. If you say, oh, less social media, then it's also more of something else, like more opportunity to play outside, to just have lunch together at school, or just more opportunities for children in return to that.
Dr. Sebastian Kurten is an assistant professor of interdisciplinary social science at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Sebastian, thanks for talking to me today.
Yes, thank you, David.
Of course. That's the show. Thanks for listening to it. We are available online. The show is available as a podcast, which you can stream whenever you like, in case you missed a part of tonight, or in case you want to catch up on things nights that you couldn't listen. Just Just head to www.lastshow.pizza. That's .pizza, not .com, lastshow.pizza. And find out more info about our podcast and follow us on social media. We'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks for tuning in.